Welcome to the Educating Mindfully Learncast, where we support mental health and well-being in education through mindfulness-based learning. Our Learncast is like a podcast, but with connected, reflective learning in our online community, which also has the opportunity for educators to earn professional development hours. This Learncast is a special experience for mindful educators and leaders to personally grow their practices within and beyond education as mindful global citizens. Before we begin, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational intention. Perhaps placing your hands on your heart. And together we will take 4 collective breaths, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. Breathing in first for ourselves, and exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff, and exhale. Then breathing in for our students, and exhale. And breathing in for society as a whole, including families and communities. And exhale. Consider pausing and committing to yourself a collective intention by saying, I am a mindful global citizen. We look forward to learning with you as we continue educating mindfully together. My name is Lindsey Frank, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for being you. Our episodes are supported by our mindful partners. Consider becoming a mindful partner today to be featured on an upcoming Learncast episode. Learn more at educatingmindfully.org/partners. Welcome to the next episode of the Educating Mindfully Learncast titled Mindfulness and Nervous System Regulation. I am Lindsey Frank, the Educating Mindfully President, Director, and the host for today's episode, and I'm here with Kalee Thompson. Welcome, Kalee.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you here, Lindsey.
Before we start, I'd love to share a bit about Kalee and her background. As the lower school coordinator of health and wellness at Raven Gap Nacoochee School, Kalee is a heart-centered counselor and holistic educator with a passion for whole school wellness. She holds a master's degree in social work and has extensive experience as a school counselor and teacher in schools across the U.S. and in India, including 6 years at the American Embassy School in New Delhi. She is a certified yoga teacher and mindfulness guide, as well as the creator of a student-led mindfulness program. She is also the author of an upcoming book, One Breath at a Time, which focuses on educator wellness. And she also didn't include here, but I'd love to share, she also has a TEDx talk. So if you enjoy this talk together, please look her up and connect with her there too. So we are grateful in sharing this time together with you, Kalee.
Thank you so much. Such a lovely introduction.
And as we begin, I want to share with our mindful community a bit of background about mindfulness-based learning and our framework, as well as defining trauma supportive practices for having a shared context, especially as we move into this conversation today. So for our listeners, Educating Mindfully has a framework, and the framework itself looks like an ecosystem. So if you haven't had a chance yet to take a look at what that visual looks like, you can visit us at educatingmindfully.org/framework, and you can see a visual of this. And within the ecosystem, there are four raindrops, and those drops represent our four essential practices that nourish the entire education ecosystem. And one of those practices is our trauma supportive practices, which is our focus for today's episode. So, first, I want to mention the strategic language we chose as an organization in calling this trauma supportive practices. You often hear trauma informed, which can hold the meaning of being informed, yet not necessarily requiring action. And the same thing with when we hear trauma sensitive, which can potentially mean that someone is aware or sensitive to the need for the practices, yet may not need to take action. Or when we share the word sensitive, it can immediately put someone in a space of need or even disempowerment rather than empowerment and growth, which can potentially continue a cycle pattern. So, purposefully, we use the words trauma hyphen supportive because that requires action through support. It encompasses the informed and sensitive layers, yet through empowerment of support. And just as we know within our multi tiered layers of support, it advocates for a varied approach based on the needs of the individual or group. So just pausing and letting that settle in for a moment. And something else we would like to share further about is actually defining trauma as well, because that word in itself has so much within it. And we also want to name here that as a listener within this episode, if you need to pause to take care, make sure that you do with the content and anything that comes up, but also having that open heart and just allowing these practices and supports come through today. So as we define trauma, I'm actually, Kalee, I'm going to have you, if you don't mind, share a little bit further, like how do you define trauma and just kind of pulling back those different pieces.
Sure. So trauma is not just the event that happened, or even the series of events that happened. It's the nervous system's overwhelming response to that event or to that experience or to the thought of that event or experience. It occurs when something, and that something could be really broad and is deeply personal. But whatever that something is too much, too fast, too soon, or just simply not enough for too long. That leaves the person feeling unsafe. They feel powerless. They feel disconnected from support. And trauma can come from a single incident, like an act of violence or an accident. It might come from ongoing stressors such as neglect or poverty, discrimination. It also might be relational harm, like inconsistent care or betrayal. And the thing is about trauma is that it impacts how our brain and our body protects us. It alters our attention. It can change our behavior, our memory, our relationships. And it's basically our nervous system saying, I'm still in danger. I'm still in danger, even when the moment has passed.
Mm.
And this type of very often trauma is not visible to the eye, right? We don't always know what's in somebody's invisible backpack. Um,
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of those pieces. And I think it's just really important for us to recognize that trauma looks different for every person. And also how the same event might happen or experience might happen, but somebody can experience it in a very different way. Yet also recognizing that that experience still gets stored in the body, which is also why We may not see certain things yet, but they might come later on. And I guess that brings us to the next piece of activators and just defining what that word is. So you might during this episode hear us talk about the word activation or activate when referring to an emotional charge or a change in behavior that occurs to cause this dysregulation. And you might also hear the word trigger, but we want to take care when we're using this word because so often people use it in the wrong way or without care. Trigger, that word trigger, is actually a word specifically used within the field of trauma care, especially with post traumatic stress disorder. So, for our listeners, please take care and notice if you are using this word without intention or understanding the context and perhaps offering the word instead to use activation or activate and just be very aware of the words that we use. So again, let's pause for integration for this moment, letting these concepts land on the heart as we open our hearts to explore this topic today. Perhaps allowing a couple breaths if that is safe and comfortable, or perhaps looking around wherever you may be to just bring your awareness present. And I do want to mention too here for myself that I was a climate and social emotional learning coach for several years and helped to develop the department within the district that I was serving in, and did a lot of work within supporting different people and levels of trauma. I also have my specialty in a trauma informed care space within my yoga practice. So, and have done my own research and connection on this too. So I just want the listeners to know as well that both of us here are sharing this space in together in this, in this work. Um, so I guess what really would be an important question here for you, Kalee, is what does emotional safety look like from the student's perspective as we, maybe take this proactive space of cultivating this safe, brave and safe space?
Right. Yes. I mean, such a great question for all of us in the field of education, and really for all of us just as humans living on this planet together. How do we cultivate emotional safety? Particularly from a student's perspective, emotional safety looks like I can show up as myself, all of myself, and I won't be shamed for it, right? I won't be humiliated for it. It's also knowing what to expect, clear routines, calm and regulated adults in my space, and spaces where mistakes are simply a part of learning, right? It's that risk taking. That's celebrated, right? Yay, you made a mistake. That means you're learning. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
mistakes, you're not growing. Um, and for the trauma impacted student, safety also means, and this is a big one in education, that the adults in their lives, the calm and regulated adults in their lives, can handle the big emotions that they might feel or show or express without withdrawing, without reacting harshly. Um, and mainly it just looks like being seen. It's things like knowing your students' names and pronouncing them correctly. It's honoring culture, and it's being highly tuned in to signals of dysregulation and knowing that that might show up differently for different students. It will, right? Everybody, it just looks different for different people. But for really noticing those signals of dysregulation and not punishing that, but honoring it and co-regulating. Safety is a felt experience, in short, like long before it's a spoken one. Safety is felt first.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that you also were bringing in, we just recently did a LearnCast episode around culturally affirming and equitable practices. And so for our listeners here, like, see, all of these come together, which is why these raindrops all come together. And that is a part of the safety piece. And that is a part of just cultivating this ecosystem of care through mindfulness-based learning. And you also brought up there the importance of adults basically, like I like to call that being like that space keeper where they're not withdrawing. Do you have any recommendations or practices for how teachers and leaders can be in that space and co-regulate when those different activations happen?
Absolutely. And I also want to honor and name that this is challenging as an adult, particularly if you have your own trauma. It can be really flustering. So I want to honor and name that piece. But I think the important thing to remember is always to come back to that compassion and the why behind the behavior. Yes, the behavior might be frustrating in the moment, particularly when as an educator, you're trying to get through the curriculum, you're trying to manage student behavior, lunch is coming up, somebody's coming in to observe. There are a lot of stressors that might be simultaneously happening, but remembering to come back to that compassion for the child that's with you, that's having a tough moment, compassion for yourself that might be reacting, and really just slowing down, right? As hard as it is, just slowing down, lowering your voice, adding a softness to it, being mindful of your body, maybe sitting, if the child is on the ground, just sit next to them. Co-regulate by offering and making it invitational. Would you like to take a few deep breaths with me? Even naming in yourself, I feel overwhelmed right now. My heart is beating fast. My shoulders are going up. I feel overwhelmed. It would help me if we could take a few deep breaths. Would you do that with me? Just really keeping compassion at the center of the work all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also thank you for sharing all of that and giving some of those really simple moments of the invitation and offering ourselves first of okay, what am I feeling? And then moving into that, which connects so deeply with one of our trees, with that mindful self connection. Um, and I also want to mention here too the power of supports and knowing that educators and leaders do not have to do this alone. And that is why we have social workers and counselors and psychologists and our mental health professionals on a team, and the importance of being connected as a team. Um, as a special educator myself, just noting sometimes there may feel like there's not a strong connection between team members at times in some schools. It's having that space within the heart to open and realize we are here together as a team, working together for a common purpose to support all of our learners together, and they are all of our learners. So I want to mention that here as well, because so often as educators, we feel like it's on our shoulders to do it all. And we really need to have all of our supports in place too. So mentioning that.
Along those lines too, Lindsay, something simple. Many of and that's the great beauty, in my opinion, of mindfulness. So many of the practices are quite simple, but subtle and impactful. And one little thing is making sure, as an educator, that as you leave work, you establish those boundaries, but then have your closing rituals for whatever happened during the day. For somebody, it might be walking around, turning off the lamps in the classroom. And as they switch the light, they think about, they process, or maybe it's meeting with a trusted colleague and just talking through in those compassionate spaces. This happened for me today. I don't really need advice. I just need to share this experience with so much love for everybody that's involved in it. But I really need to lighten my own load by sharing it. So maybe it's your drive home and you listen to music, or maybe it's the walk to the car that you just place one foot in front of the other and take a deep breath as you go. But just be very mindful to sort of have in the therapy world, we call it shedding, but different techniques to sort of shed the emotional load of the day so you can protect and maintain those emotional boundaries as an educator that are incredibly challenging to maintain and hold, but also vitally important.
Hmm. Wow, I have several questions coming in my mind, but and connections. But you mentioned shedding. I just had a conversation with another LearnCast guest, and she was referring to um, being able to, instead of like thinking of a light switch where it's on and off, that it's on a dimmer. So
I
maybe
love that.
thinking about, instead of that shutting, how can we continue to dim down? And this was in regards to how do we prepare the body for rest? But guess what? This is all about that too. How do we change our mind from where we are at from school and transition? So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to offer that other word in case. And you're bringing up another great question about sharing about a student, and what are some sensitive and supportive ways to share concerns about a student's emotional well-being, and in those moments where we are maybe needing to connect with others to process, how can we do so in a way, and also is it necessary, and when is it not necessary too, if you don't mind sharing.
Absolutely. This is something that I've encountered quite a lot. I think there is a clear difference between venting and like needing to collaborate with your key partners who perhaps also work with this student, with the school counselor who definitely has a vested interest. Making sure that you are respectful always in any type of communication that happens. This is a child's lived experience and it is their whole world that they are showing up with. And as educators, we have to be mindful, even when it's frustrating for us, even when like it feels like too much, that we are person-centered and child-centered in our work, grounded in compassion. And so sometimes we all need to vent, but please just make sure that you're being respectful. Confidentiality is respected. Because again, this is a child who is in your care for the day or for an hour or for however long. And so really making sure that that is held and maintained. Um, I think that we also need to always remember, and it is my firm belief, that students are doing the best that they can. If they would do better, they could, right? If they could, they would, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're they want to feel they want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And they are very often highly tuned into your response, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one sensitive way is really just also to honor if you're for example, you're talking with a student to honor and to say, I'm seeing some signs of stress. I notice that you're doing this with your hands or whatever a sign might be. And I want to partner with you. I want to help you. Not using labels, not using a diagnosis. Unless the student brings that up to us, that is their personal choice. Um, Focusing instead on observable behaviors, right? They're probably aware. Maybe they're not, but like naming a behavior is totally different than naming a diagnosis. Um, and so, really using that behavior to help them, and just always leading with compassion, curiosity, and collaboration to continue the conversation, never blame, right? So, it should
Right.
any conversation, taking it from the student to colleagues or with a counselor or whoever you might be speaking with, just taking it from a space of venting to more like, what's driving this? How can I help it? How can I show up even more fully for my student that is struggling instead of focusing on the more negative?
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that you mentioning, can I partner with you? I love that. I also appreciate too where we're not necessarily asking, can I help you? It's can I support you? Because so often I don't need any help, right?
Right.
And so it's the language when we can be fully present, which is why that mountain is really grounding within our ecosystem and connected through mindful self connection and mindful self regulation. We'll get into those in other episodes, but that's why these practices help us to be within this ecosystem and offer the support that's needed there. So the words matter. And when we can be fully present and aware of that language we're using and the intention behind it, we really can shift the entire experience. So, um,
Also, something that's coming up for me is I've worked in multilingual environments my entire career where like a child might be learning English and might not understand the language, the words that are coming out of my mouth, but really also showing that partnership is equally key. How I how I present, what I'm doing with my hands, with my body. Am I sitting next to them? Am I on their level or am I looking down at them? Right? Does my face look frustrated and angry or do I look neutral or compassionate? Right? So really also being finely tuned into body language, as well as the language that we use.
Thank you for sharing all of those pieces. And um, knowing that, and you mentioned this as well, but reiterating that all of our ripples from ourself, staff, students, and society, which means our families and communities, we're all coming into experiences from our own lived experiences. So, although our focus right now has been within students, all these same things connect with every single ripple. And I don't know if you want to mention anything else there or just let that be. But it's just really important for us to realize and name that. And I know all of us as listeners know this, but sometimes we need to hear it again. So just letting that land for a moment. And what's coming up for me right now is trust.
Right.
And I'm wondering, how do we build trust with students, or any ripple, but especially students who may struggle to connect, especially with connecting to adults in the school? And how do they create their support system? What are some ideas you can share around that?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it just continues to come back to being seen, heard, and valued, right? So knowing names, simply learning about somebody, saying to your class, I really like you guys and I want to get to know you better. And so perhaps it's something as simple as like in your morning meeting, having a question of the day. So we get to know each other, right? Because trust is most often built through consistency rather than charisma.
Mm-hmm.
Charisma is great, but it's that consistency, particularly for students who have experienced unpredictability. Those micro moments, they really matter, right? So following through on what you say, doing what you say you're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
um, greeting your students each day outside your classroom. Good morning. I'm so happy to see you. It's going to be a great day, right? Um, this is a big one. Repairing behavior when there's a rupture. Sometimes you will say the wrong thing. You will do the wrong thing. I do too. And
Mm-hmm.
it's important and key in those moments to sort of name that I made a mistake. I was stressed and something came out of my mouth that I don't actually mean, or I acted this way and it's not how I feel. I'm truly sorry. What do you need? What can I do to repair that? Right. So honoring that. Um, Again, always leading with curiosity and compassion, asking what's the need behind this behavior? What would help you in this moment? Instead of what's wrong? Why are you doing that? That
Right.
judgment, that tone. Oh, tone. We could have a whole conversation on
Yes.
tone and body language. Um,
Mhm.
and also just really bringing it back to the students, giving them voice, choice, agency, and opportunities to regulate on their own without feeling spotlighted or singled out, right? Let them empower them to use their tools, to use their strategies. And then depending on how your relationship is with that student, either quietly later in the day, or when the opportunity feels right, to really name that you saw them regulating. I saw you doing that. That was amazing. And I want you to know that you're doing a really great job in hard moments.
Hmm. Wow, again, there's so many amazing things there. Like, first, those subtle practices that are trauma supportive of that voice and choice, providing supportive choices and giving them that ownership piece, and the regulation on their own. Within our micro credential, we have a whole section around developing different ideas. And many of you listening may have like those calming spaces in your classroom, but how important those are that are integrated with intention and not just put in there,
Or
but
as punishment, right? Like
right.
home corner.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, like with intention and practice and encouragement and feedback, the power of feedback that you called forward, like that is such an incredible teaching tool that is naturally embedded. These things don't take extra time, they are trauma supportive practices. Um, trust is so huge. And you mentioned several of these things already within like the environment, but I'm curious because the environment itself
Yes.
has power
Yeah,
in cultivating that trust. And I'm just curious if you have any other recommendations around how can we create that environment, not only through our being, but also the environment itself. What you have to share.
sure. I think one key thing is always being mindful of visual load, of sensory load, of auditory load. Um, classrooms can be quite loud at times, and sometimes that's okay, but for certain students, that can be really overwhelming, right? So it might be something as simple as having soft things on the walls to tamper sound, or having barriers in the room which sort of deflect sound. Uh, Low lighting can be really nice instead of the harsh overheads. Even having things over, if you have fluorescent lights overhead, having something over them to sort of soften the light. That's, of course, aligned with whatever fire regulation you have in your
Yes.
school. Let's be mindful of that too, safety.
Yes.
Um, but then just creating that warm and inviting space where it doesn't feel judgmental just by looking at it, right?
Mm.
So it's not punitive, the work on the walls, it's celebratory, right? The messaging that you have in your classroom is uplifting and welcoming. And it when I don't know, as somebody who is a deeply feeling person, somebody who has an empath, I can tell when I walk into a space, how does it feel, right? And I think that that should be our judge. How do you feel walking into a space? Do you feel like this is a space where I'm safe to learn, where I'm welcomed, or a space that feels cold? And I don't mean literally, though it might be that too, right? Like, do you need a heater? But also, like, how do you make the space feel warm and inviting with your color scheme, with what's on the walls, with the even the furniture? Sometimes we have restrictions around that, and I also understand that. Um, Having a small rug, having stuffed animals in the classroom, certain small things. And also, and I think this is really key in any space, yes, bring your educator lens, but draw in the students, help them, let them co-create the space with you at the start of the year or at any point. Hey guys, what do we need in this space so it feels good for everybody? Well, maybe somebody needs a teddy bear and somebody else needs, I don't know, rainbow markers. I don't know. It could be anything, right? But really adding, again, that student voice, choice, and agency so they can say what they need, and then the space will be what they need.
Yeah, I was going to mention that co-creation, so I'm so grateful that you did, and how powerful that is. When I taught seventh grade pre-algebra, I've taught all kinds of random things. When I taught that, my classroom, I was in a science lab that we shared. So there was a science lab, and then I was teaching math, and then there was like this creative arts that had it in the morning. So you never knew what you were walking in because also I was a kindergarten through eighth grade interventionist that same year. So, lots of flipping on and off within my mind where I was at. But the section that I was teaching, there was different kinds of learners within our space that just really needed a lot of care and they really wanted ownership. So I literally gave them a blank sheet of paper and I said, draw our classroom, and I had them just really see what made their space and what can we include, what can we adapt. And that just was so powerful because that also shows their values and what they value. um, you also mentioned the power of lighting, and I want to name as well that sometimes dim lighting can be an activator for some
Yes, it
people.
can.
So, just because we're sharing some of these things, remember it is something that can be for some people one supportive, and for somebody else it may not be, which is why we need to have that choice and
Right.
that agency and empowering our students. Like if they need to say, you know what, can you turn the lights on a bit higher, for them to have that voice there. And I really appreciate agreements, shared agreements, which really help to um, empower that voice. And even the science of color, you brought up colors, like there is research behind certain colors. So I'm just, I love all of what you just shared. And
Well,
this is wonderful.
so outside, so within, right? We do both. We make our space what we need, and then we also give students the tools. And as educators, hopefully, we are able to have access to that same knowledge so we can build our own toolboxes. So whatever calm we cultivate out in our external world, we are also able to cultivate in our internal world when the environment isn't quite right, right? So it's both and.
Yes, yes, that inner side too. And you also mentioned asking, how does it feel? I after if you change the environment as your students are walking in, ask them that question. How do you feel? And if you I would even have within the ripples, like, okay, who's a colleague that I can ask to come in here, and just ask them, like, oh, how do you feel when you're in my classroom? Like, just see.
Right.
And it just helps give different lenses of how different people are experiencing it. So many golden nuggets here.
Love it.
So, and I know, I mean, we could totally have a lot. This is not a one and done, but we still have a little bit more time. Can I ask a few more
Of
questions?
course. Yes,
Okay.
please. Please do.
um so we're talking about these proactive pieces, and I think that's really important for us to share about. But can you maybe share a bit further, like, how do you know when somebody may be activated and
Mm,
or starting to, like, what are some of those signs that maybe we don't always pick up on, and what are some practical de-escalation strategies that also maintain that connection and dignity and support?
right. I mean, I think it's so important and so great that you highlight this that activators look different, right? And they're not always logical and they're not always visible. So an activator might be sensory, it might be relational, it could be a situational cue that causes somebody's nervous system to shift into survival mode, right? To shift into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we just don't always know. But that's where we come back to that compassion and that sensitivity. Um, and always moving forward with that. So I think the co-regulation piece is vitally important here before we address any type of behavior. Before we can move forward, let's co-regulate. So that might mean, again, like lowering your voice, giving them space without abandonment. I can see you're upset right now. Your body is making big movements. So I'm going to step away, but I'm not leaving you. I'm going to sit right here with you and maybe offering again, would you like to take a breath with me? Would that help? Or modeling, I'm going to take a deep breath right now, or I'm going to tear a piece of paper, right? Offering a tool. I'm going to draw right now because that might help me. And then just kind of have it beside you in case they also want to partake. Um, you can also ask or say, really using that non-judgmental language, right? So again, something like, I can see that you're overwhelmed right now. Your body is showing me that you don't feel comfortable. Um, it reassures them that they're not broken, right? It's not bad. You're struggling, and sometimes we all struggle. My struggle might look different from your struggle, but I struggle too, right? And so it's protecting that relationship, really being relationship centered and driven, as we help the student return to their normal sort of like zone of regulation, where they're in the okay zone, where they feel all right, rather than whatever it is that they're experiencing in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I totally wore my green shirt on purpose for like the zones today.
Yes.
So, the zones of regulation, you brought that up, and that's a wonderful resource. And, that also brings another resource with like the window of tolerance from Dr. Dan Siegel. So, just helping to grow that window a bit more through all the things that you've already shared here, to help people and our students stay within that window space and within that space of regulation, um, and being in that relationship based lens. Um, And
One thing, sorry,
go
um,
ahead, please do.
that I'm keenly aware of, and it sort of circles back to our earlier conversation about like sort of that venting versus collaborating versus dimming, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
Students are so attuned to our behavior. They know if okay, let's say you help a child co-regulate and you do a beautiful job, but then you go to recess and you are talking trash about that student or not in a respectful way to a co-teacher, they will see, right? And they will feel. And so maintaining that dignity goes beyond the moment, right? It's how you conduct yourself all the time, which is a fantastic mantle to carry as an educator and also so vitally important that we just maintain that respect when we're with the student and even when we're not in their presence, just maintaining that respect and compassion for the person, for the child, first and foremost.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so easy to get caught up in our own emotions with that, which is why mindful self-regulation is so important. And just that dimming and that shedding piece of, okay, that experience has happened. How can I transition mindfully to whatever it is that I need to do next? And we've talked a lot about how adults may be sharing about their emotions, but I'm curious, how can students continue to grow that skill in identifying and communicating their state of regulation? Like, we are providing, and you mentioned several of these strategies of modeling what that language may be, but are there any other ways that we can help students to identify and communicate in a healthy way?
Oh, so many. I mean, I think really just normalizing the spectrum of feelings and emotions and experiences that we all have throughout our day. Um, I'm a big fan of the language that we use, right? So broadening their exposure to different words to describe how they're feeling and what's going on, making sure they understand the words that they're using. Offering sort of micro moments of regulation, just embedding it throughout the day. Okay, we're coming inside from recess. We're going to pause outside and we're going to take 3 deep breaths if that feels right for you. The point of this is to let our brain and our bodies know that we are leaving the playground where our bodies can be big and our voices can be loud, and we're transitioning into a learning space where we need to be a little bit calmer, right? Maybe it's inviting a bell throughout the day as an invitation to pause and to breathe. It's really embedding these simple, short practices throughout the day. So students have those micro opportunities and they don't have to it just normalizes it if it's available for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something this is reminding me of, and somebody just shared about this in our member community online. They just recently shared a picture of their like emotional word wall,
Love that.
and also being able to not just do the emotion side, but like body sensation, emotion, like all of those different pieces. So if we can start giving them more language around the different kinds of emotions and celebrate that within that space. So I just think that's a beautiful idea as well.
One of the things that I like to use is the mood meter from Ruler with Yale, and I love it because it has a pleasantness scale on the bottom and then an energy level, right? And it's color coded, and I think students can really relate to that and build their vocabulary at the same time, which is just fantastic. But also something as silly as like, what are you on the dog scale today? Right. And there's a pug with sunglasses on, and then there's like a Dalmatian that's on the ground, right? Like just honoring whatever it is that you're showing up and whatever developmental stage a child is at. So it's accessible for them. A kindergartner can't look at the Yale mood meter and use that language most likely, but they can look at pictures of pumpkins and tell you which one they identify with in this moment, right? And knowing that it's this moment, moments shift very quickly and moods and emotions also shift and we're allowed to evolve, right? Like ideally we're evolving in a way that brings us to a place where we feel good and steady. But really also normalizing that, like whatever you're feeling now, you might not feel the same way in an hour.
Right. Emotions are in motion. And you're also bringing up, again, just reiterating that these trauma supportive practices are not one size fits all.
No, definitely.
And it just depends on the individual. And I'm reiterating a couple of their strategies of trauma supportive strategies of being able to be visible and can be tracked, like for students to be able to see, okay, I'm safe and my teacher is here with me. That choice, that agency, the invitational language.
Yes.
We're talking a lot about breath, and that happens quite a bit within mindfulness, but knowing that breath may not be a safe and comfortable space for everybody. And a really wonderful resource is from David Trelevin, the trauma sensitive mindfulness. That anything from him is really wonderful resource. And just awareness, like even breath retention is not
Mm,
always a safe practice. And so, like, whenever I offer breath, it's always a continuous breath, typically, especially with students.
right.
Um, and I always will offer an alternative. So, like, for example, like if they have their journals out and maybe we were to offer a breath, they could breathe, or maybe they're tracing the side of the journal that is
Yes.
still around the amount of breath that it would be. So it's a different kind of sensation. So just offering these different pieces here. And do you have anything else coming to mind for you for the
Yes, definitely. I
differentiation?
mean, I love that you mentioned that. It's such a beautiful thing. The same can be true for closing eyes. Not
Yeah.
everybody feels safe with their eyes closed. So I always offer you can keep your eyes open. You can have a soft gaze like you're about to fall asleep, but you don't. Or you can close your eyes. Pick what feels best for you and know that nobody's looking at you. Nobody's judging. And I even reassure students, I'm not even looking, right? This is your practice. So you do what feels right for you in this moment. It offering those alternatives, especially with mindfulness, especially being just trauma sensitive. We don't know. So really being aware of that, or trauma supportive, excuse me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Being really
Yeah. Well, and for our members, we have a ceremony, which is an intention ceremony, where we connect with a stone. And during that, for our members, we also share like this could be a practice for your students. And so when I was coaching a teacher, she was at a junior high level. All of the students did have an intention stone. And so whenever the practice invitational practice. See, that's what I like to call these, are invitational practices, because some of our communities, mindfulness or meditation or however, may not be accessible. So knowing your communities, but I love sharing invitational practices. And so they would take their stone out and they could look at that if they didn't want to close their eyes, or if just even having that softness. Sometimes they came from a place where they didn't get a lot of sleep. So
right.
it allowed them the opportunity to stay focused and present. So offering that as well as a strategy. And this is great for staff too.
Absolutely. And I think one thing also to be honoring our fellow educators who work with young students. So part and parcel for me of this invitational experience is also to say, if you choose not to do one of these things, we are not, and then I have to kind of name it, right? We are not touching our neighbors. We are not making eyes at somebody across the room. We're finding something to focus on. And the reason is always connecting it to the why. The reason is so we can respect everybody's experience, right? If I'm playing, then my neighbor, they can't be present in the moment, right? So connecting it to the why, but also sometimes we have to explicitly name like this behavior won't work in this setting. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And when I also was working with the younger ones, I'd always say we don't want to steal someone's joy. Uh,
oh,
so, like, just another way of, and that's where like having even just like mindful coloring, or
yes.
like a sticky note, just plain sticky note. For our youngers, they were larger pieces of paper for our motor skills, fine motor skills.
Yes. Big sticky
But
note.
or even like there's specific tactile tools they could
Yes.
use. So it's like you can either choose to engage in this practice that we're doing together, or if you want, here's your other options. But we always want to provide those choices, and they have practiced and received
Yes.
feedback. And
Yes.
if they are not used appropriately, then it's removed for a bit, retaught,
Right.
reintegrated, or maybe it's not the right tool for them and we find another tool. So,
Yes. Yes. There are
Woo.
always options. And I think
Mhm.
that's important when we're talking about mindfulness and making it appropriate for the age and stage, right? And
Mhm.
mindful of the amount of time that we're taking and things like that too. So it really
Mhm.
is most impactful and accessible for all.
Yes. Oh, and you bring up time. And I know we're almost out of time, but like the timing piece of like sometimes when people are just starting out in this journey, and again, for those who are starting out in your journey or have been on your journey, you can always continue through our micro credential program to continue enhancing these skills just a little bit further. You can find out more information on our website at educatingmindfully.org. However, like when we're sharing with younger students, like even just a minute
Yes.
is a or if right, like sometimes it's just, can we all just take one breath or movement or something that's guided and then moving forward and then continuing to uh, enhance that a bit further. And it's not just I'm going to play this video either, because a lot of times the videos are not trauma supportive because it is a one size fit all with the videos. So we have to be I know we have to be aware of those different pieces. And you know, I think this is bringing us to our final question here is like, if educators and leaders can do one thing tomorrow or today, what would be a practice that you would recommend for them?
Okay, I'm going to recommend two.
All right.
Um, so number one is slow down for yourself, right? And reconnect with yourself. Do what you need to do to feel present, to be present in that compassionate way. And know that that looks different for everybody, right? So, really just being mindful of how you present and what you need to be your best self, right? Or maybe even not best self, because I think that language is sometimes like, well, to show up, right? Authentically and compassionately.
Be
And then,
present. Be fully
right?
present, right?
Yes,
Like, yeah,
present,
we're
present.
present. And present means we can have any of the experiences, but
Yes.
we are fully present.
Right. Yes. And then number two is just really connecting with your students, making time to greet them, make eye contact. Again, culturally sensitive there, knowing that for some cultures that's not, for some it is. Checking in with genuine presence and just knowing that regulated relationships are the foundation of all learning. If that's not there, it will be much harder to get to the actual academic piece. And those relationships are built in tiny little moments all throughout your day. When it comes, I mean, at the end of the day, choose connection first, and then everything becomes possible.
Moments matter. Moments
Moments matter.
matter. Any other resources that you want to share that you can recommend as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think first of all, like this beautiful community is such a fantastic resource. So I'm a little bit biased as a board member, but I'm also just truly that the community can be a fantastic source. The micro credential is great. And we're lucky that we live in this digital age where you can find resources at your fingertips. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network can be really great. Mind Up also offers quite a lot. And You mentioned a book earlier, and I meant to write it down, Trauma Supportive Mindfulness.
Yeah, trauma sensitive mindfulness from
Yeah.
David Trelevin. Yeah.
Yes, all of these, and so much more. And I think that really just tuning into this podcast is a great step,
Mhm.
right? And being aware of how you present, and then making those small shifts if necessary to being more present and more trauma supportive, a little more trauma supportive in your actions. That's felt and needed.
Hmm. Well, thank you for sharing all of those resources. We will make sure that we link them in our LearnCast episode. And as we close, I do want to share for our members that we will continue this conversation in our member online community. So each week this month, we will post a reflection question. And by sharing your own insights and responding to peers, you can also earn professional development hours. So you can learn more at educatingmindfully.org/learncast. And we will also release a companion voices blog and a mindfulness-based learning lesson inspiration to support you as you integrate these trauma supportive practices into your teaching and leading. So just know that those resources are coming for this month, or whenever you're listening to this, know that they are available. And we invite you to pause for a moment, even just pausing the recording as needed, and just commit to one action that you can take to extend these practices into your life. And just pausing, noticing what's coming up. And then with reconnecting back to the heart, we are so grateful to have shared this time together with you, and especially thank you to you, Kalee, for sharing all of your amazing insights today.
Pleasure. I love these type of conversations. I love that we can offer this and share this out with the world. And I thank everybody for taking time to listen.
Yes. And would you like to share how people can connect with you?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at Kalee Thompson and on LinkedIn, as well as in our community online through Educating Mindfully. So, Lindsey, thank you so much for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. It's always a joy to chat, especially about this deep and meaningful topics.
Yes. And thank you for holding this space for this. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
We hope this episode inspires you to take action as a mindful leader and educator. As we close, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational breathing practice. Maybe placing one hand at your heart and/or one hand on your stomach, and together we will take 4 collective breaths, integrating our learning, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. First and foremost, breathing for ourselves. Inhale. Exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff. Inhale. Exhale. Third, breathing in for our students. Inhale. Sipping a little bit more air for our students. Exhale. And finally, breathing in for our worldwide community. Take the biggest inhale yet. Exhale. Consider pausing and committing a collective intention together by saying, we are mindful global citizens. We invite you to continue this conversation with us and our member online community. Learn more about our nonprofit's LearnCast membership and our mindfulness-based learning micro-credential program at www.educatingmindfully.org. My name is Dee DuBose, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for learning with us as we collectively do our parts to make schools and Mother Earth better than we found it. Have a great day on purpose. Peace.